This is impossible. Penny looked at the marriage certificate in between her fingers. Since when did I get married? Penny studied the printouts in her hand. The woman in the certificate was definitely her, but this man. Penny couldn't recall ever meeting him. The man in the certificate had a well-proportioned face with symmetrical facial features. He had a strong, defined jawline, adding a masculine look to him. His long, sharp, deep-set eyes were dark but very captivating. As Penny wondered about this situation, her phone rang. "Heya. How's the wedding?" asked the person from the other end of the line. "Well, turns out I'm married." "Congrats." Penny frowned, thinking Yugi didn't get what she was trying to say. "Yugi, can you look up this man named?" Her eyes veered to her husband's name. "Zoran Pearson." "Who's that?" "That's what I want to find out. I'll call you again later." Penny ended the call and gazed at the certificate once again. All her life, she had been waiting for this day to come. The day she could marry herself off and leave her household. It was no secret that Penny had been wanting to get out of the family. It was for the best for everyone, especially for herself. However, no one knew Penny had another big secret. This wasn't her first life. She promised that in this lifetime, she would live it on her own terms. But now, that plan was slightly shaken by the man registered as her husband. "I don't know if this is a good thing, but what I know is I have to fix this," she whispered as her eyelids drooped. "I can't afford to make the same mistake I did in my first life." Her first life ended in a tragedy. Thinking about it, Penny told herself she couldn't afford a mishap in this lifetime. How her life ended and started. "I didn't do it." Penny looked at the man seated on the other side of the glass. The first thing she noticed was his untrimmed beard, his messy hair, and the dark bags under his eyes. This was her eldest brother, Atlas, the once admired CEO of Global Prime Logistics. "Brother, just this once, please." Penny planted her hand on the glass as her eyes brimmed with tears. "Please, believe me. I didn't do it. I'm innocent. It wasn't me." Atlas slowly lifted his olive brown eyes, the natural allure in them still present. However, it paled in comparison to the helplessness and hopelessness within them. "Innocent?" he repeated quietly. "Penny, you wouldn't be behind that glass if you were innocent." "No." Tears flooded her face as her entire body and voice shook in desperation. "I am innocent. Please, help me. Even if it's true, Penny, it's over." Atlas smiled wryly. "You did what you did, and now we're paying the price." A whimper escaped her tightly sealed lips as she shook her head in denial. "Hugo's dead, and Slater, his career's dead too." Tears formed in the corner of his eyes as he gazed at the once beautiful Penny, who seemed to have aged in prison just months after her trial ended. "Our lives are over, Penny. People see us as terrorists, enemies of the country, corrupt to the core. You proved that when you made your confession. But I only did that so they wouldn't arrest you too, enough." Atlas slammed his hand against the glass between them, grinding his teeth angrily. "I know you hate us, but you took it too far. Even after being proven guilty, you still claim you're innocent." "Because I am." "No." "Shut up," he roared, making her flinch. He drew a jagged breath as he leaned forward. "Penny, you listen to me. Just tell me, why did you do it? I just want to know." Penny's heart sank as she bit her quivering lips, tasting her own tears and snot. Looking at her desperate brother, she didn't know what to say anymore. She had already told him everything from beginning to end, but alas, he wouldn't believe her. He never believed a single word she said. "I'm already on death row." She hiccuped, placing both her hands on the glass separating them. "And yet, I was still hopeful that for once, you would side with me, your real younger sister. Just this once." Her breath hitched as her tears blurred her vision. She wasn't asking him for too much. She never asked them for too much. All she wanted was to be accepted by her brothers and treated as family. But alas, even at this moment, he still couldn't give that. "Very well. I hate you," she whispered, her voice shaky but clear. "I hate all of you, there you go. You heard my reason. Did that give you enough peace now?" I might be in prison now, but I'm not the only one going down. You, your brothers, and that pretentious little sister you so adore. Atlas scoffed as he staggered back. I knew it, you're jealous. Yes, I am jealous. Penny yelled her frustrations out. I was swapped even before my mother could embrace me. I grew up with an abusive aunt who would sell me for anything. And when I thought I was finally going to have a good life since my family found me, you, Hugo, and Slater never failed to make me feel I didn't belong there every single day. You never failed to make me feel you would prefer to have this person who isn't your real sister as your family over me, who is your flesh and blood. I did everything, Atlas. Everything. I worked hard and studied hard 10 times more than anyone in hopes you'd like me. I enrolled in all martial arts classes to have common ground with Hugo and even studied music and arts so there's something I could talk about with Slater. Her voice cracked as she balled her hands on the glass. So, yes, I am jealous, because Nina didn't have to do all that for you guys to like her. You really are something. Atlas couldn't help but laugh in ridicule, shaking his head in disbelief. I knew it. I knew you were bad news when you came into our house that day. He took a deep breath, trying to process what he heard. Well. He ran his tongue across his inner cheek, speechless. At least now, I understand. Atlas. I heard your execution date is set. He offered her a bitter smile, rocking his head. I don't know what to say, Penelope. I just finished Hugo's funeral arrangement, so I'll get you a good resting place, but it won't be in the same place as our parents' and Hugo's. After saying his piece with great difficulty, Atlas turned his back on her. Penny just sat on the same chair listlessly even after he was gone. Everything she told him was true, but it was just a fraction of it. The truth was, with her desire to be seen by her brothers, Penny believed a malicious person. She was so blinded that she thought she was doing the right thing, only for her brothers and Penny to be accused of a crime they never committed. To make amends, Penny took all the blame. Even so, her confession only saved her brothers from getting behind bars. She couldn't stop the repercussions that struck their family business, her brothers' reputation, and their lives and careers. That was the first and last visit Penny had until her execution day. Dragging her feet to the place that would be her last stop, Penny kept her eyes downcast. She had already lost track of time and her will to live was almost gone. When she sat down on the metal chair, she glanced at the officers who were strapping her body to the chair. Once they were finished, they all left her in a small square room with only a mirror across from her. This was the first time she had seen herself in months. She looked horrible, pathetic, and helpless. It reminded her of Atlas and how he looked the last time he came to see her. We'll start with the process now. Suddenly, a voice from the speaker attached to the upper corners of the execution room caressed her ears. Is there anything else you want to say? Anything she wanted to say? The corner of her lips twitched a little as she whispered, if I ever get to live in my next life, I'd rather be an orphan than become their sister. Penny almost didn't finish her last words as electricity traveled from her brain to the end of her toes. It hurt like hell, but she couldn't scream. All she could do was clench her teeth as she seized. She didn't know how long it took, but she could remember the scent of burnt flesh before succumbing to the darkness. The sound of a soothing lullaby caressed her from her deep slumber. So warm. Penny immediately frowned before she could open her eyes. Why am I waking up? As far as she could remember, she should have been electrocuted to death. There was no other expectation after that. Her story should have ended with that. Confusion clouded her mind before a sudden conclusion crossed her mind that silenced all of her chaotic thoughts. Don't tell me the electric chair broke down and I have to do all of that again. Penny gasped in horror, about to push herself up on instinct. But alas, she immediately realized she couldn't move her arms and legs. Am I strapped? She wondered, opening her lips to make a sound. Much to her horror, what she heard was a baby coo. Huh? What in the world? Penny froze when an unfamiliar face hovered over her. Only then did she also realize there was a warm lamp over her. Hi, baby, said the nurse in a small voice. Your mommy will pick you up in a bit, Penny looked at the woman in horror, looking around her surroundings while wiggling herself out of the blankets wrapped around her. Baby decorations, warm lights, small transparent tubs. She was flabbergasted at the sudden conclusion in her heart. Am I do I think I am? Holy sure, hick, wah. Her train of thought stopped when she heard a baby cry, which she quickly realized had come from her. Before she knew it, the rest of the babies in the nursery took her cries as a challenge and also started making noises until they cried like a choir. In the eyes of a child, you will see the world as it should be, except this child. Right this very moment, Penny was sure all her eyes were screaming was horror. Babies were meant to be innocent, free from worries and wonders of the world. They should be sleeping soundlessly, smiling innocently, and simply a delightful existence. Not a baby with the memory of her criminal record. Was she reborn? Did she reincarnate so soon? Myriads of questions crossed her newborn brain, but none of them were answered. Thinking back to the time before she woke up in this small body, Penny could vividly remember her time in prison and all the years she spent trying to be a part of the family she was rightfully a member of, like it was yesterday. Just like that time when her so-called family found her, Penny felt the same exact sense of hope for a new beginning. It happened sometime around winter. Penny rubbed her little hands together and blew on them to give herself some warmth. The tip of her nose was red, and some snowflakes clung to her cheeks. Her body shivered within the worn-out and short jacket she had since she was 6 years old. "Auntie," she called from the outside, knocking on the small gates with her bare fingers. "Auntie, I learned my lesson now. Please let me in?" Penny stood on her toes, barely catching sight of the house's small front yard through the small gate. "Auntie," she called, her eyes welling up. Her gaze veered to the small window, where she could see her auntie preparing warm soup for her children. "Auntie, it's cold here." Her voice lowered as it shook along with the mild breeze that blew past her. "Please let me in? I'll be good." Penny clasped the cold metal gates as she sniffed, wiping her tears with her sleeve that only reached half of her arm. She turned around and hugged herself, rubbing her shoulders and then her hands together while blowing on them. Looking around, snow already blanketed almost everything. The houses were all closed to protect themselves from the unbearably cold season. Penny was just 13, but she knew if she stayed out of there, she would freeze to death. Looking back at the gate one more time, she realized her auntie's anger wouldn't cease anytime soon. With that thought in mind, Penny dragged her feet away. Aunt Baby went to her husband's place, she thought, thinking of the only neighbor who showed concern for her. If this neighbor was only here, Penny would have been in her place the minute her real auntie chased her away after Penny accidentally spilled soup in her hand. Harvey's mom might let me in their house for the time being, was what she told herself, reminded of a friend around the community. Who, so cold? As Penny walked on the side of the street, she did everything to keep herself warm. She was glad she was already wearing this jacket while doing chores back home. If not, her auntie would have chased her out with whatever she had on. On her way to her friend's house, Penny slowed down at the sight of 3 sedans driving carefully down the street. They looked so luxurious, was the first thing that came into her mind. But why are they driving in this poor neighborhood? Penny found herself in awe of the 2 shiny black sedans and 1 big SUV. Unknowingly, her steps slowed down even more, following the cars with her gaze until her neck was twisting. Much to her surprise, the parade stopped in front of her auntie's house. Huh? Curiosity brimmed her eyes, wondering if her auntie found herself in trouble again due to her bad gambling habits and her big mouth. Penny didn't want to stop and postpone finding herself some warmth. However, since there were unknown people outside her auntie's house, she walked back. Whether they were guests or they would arrest her auntie, this was her chance to get inside the house. Excuse me," she called meekly as soon as a middle-aged man in a lavish black coat stepped out of the vehicle. "Mister, do you need help?" The man was tall and with a petite girl on his side, he gazed down at her. Penny almost flinched when their eyes met. It was already cold, but his eyes were even more piercingly chilly. "I happen to live in this house." She pointed at the gates, eyes on him. "By any chance, are you looking for my auntie?" "No," said the man, studying the young lady before him. The teen in front of him already had white residue clinging to her face, indicating she had been out in this cold for quite some time now. Yet, despite her shivering shoulders, she looked at him with genuine curiosity, as if this weather was something she could fight for a long time. Is your name Penelope? He asked in the same flat tone. Deep lines appeared on Penelope's brows. Did her auntie use her again as collateral? Penny intuitively took a step back as all sorts of negative thoughts swirled in her mind. The curiosity in her eyes now had a mix of fear. Not long ago, Penny had to pay for her auntie's debt by doing free work in the restaurant owned by one of her auntie's mahjong buddies. If that person hadn't been arrested, Penny would still be working there. Considering these people seemed to be well off, she was afraid this time around. Doing labor wasn't the only thing they would want from her. Perhaps her organs this time. Get her a coat, ordered the middle-aged man while keeping his gaze on Penny. The young miss is cold. Young miss? Penny narrowed her eyes before she saw a subtle smile turned up on the middle-aged man's face. His smile might be short, but for some reason, it brought this warmth and reassurance in her heart. The man casually took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. Young miss, we're here to bring you back home, he said gently, the commanding tone of his voice still present. We'll explain everything to you with your auntie. He paused and nodded at her reassuringly. You are safe now. Safe. Oh, how those words sounded so reassuring and warm back then. Penny actually believed the man was telling the truth. She was safe and no one would maltreat her ever again. When he revealed the situation to Penny and her auntie, Penny almost jumped with joy. Back then, in her mind, she thought she would never feel left out again. Her real family was taking her home. But alas, she was wrong. The warmth she felt from that man was short-lived, like a futile flame in this fiercely cold season. Penny never got out of that cold winter. It was just a different place, different people, and slightly different life, but it was all too the same. Damn it, she heard herself hick as she remembered her pathetic life. If I truly got reincarnated, I won't make the same mistakes I did. Penny's consciousness felt very active one moment ago, but now she felt sleepy. Considering she was a newborn, sleeping was only natural. As she slowly dwindled to slumber, she caught an unfamiliar nurse entering the nursery while looking around cautiously. Huh? Penny flinched when she felt her crib move. Forcing herself to study the person, her vision was still a little blurry. What is she doing? She wondered when her crib stopped, watching the figure move around. After a second, she heard something light fall. What is going on? Before she could process what was happening, Penny slowly fell into another deep slumber. So, this is the child? Yes, and the TCH. Can't you find someone else to take care of that bitch's child? The nurse smiled apologetically. Ma'am, I'm sorry. But you're the mother's emergency contact. Penny slowly found herself being coaxed out of slumber by the voices around. She opened her eyes, her vision still a little blurry. What's going on now? Did my new mom pick me up? Or is it my dad? TCH. Another loud snap caressed Penny's eyes, almost sensing this bad premonition at the sound of it. This is her kid? Penny blinked ever so slowly, watching the person move her face closer. As soon as the latter was close enough for her to see clearly, her heart sank as she mentally gasped in horror. Auntie? 3 years later, being reincarnated and starting life all over again as a different person was something Penny quickly came to terms with. But reliving her nightmare of a life? It took her quite some time to accept the phenomena that struck her. Chewing on her pacifier, the 3-year-old Penny watched two of her auntie's children grab each other's hair. These twin little devils were only a few months older than her. It was why these two had always ganged up on her in her first life. Their bonding was to make Penny take the fall or blame her for everything to avoid their mother's wrath. She used to cry about it, feel bitter about it, and be deeply jealous of the love they received. But not in this lifetime. The good thing about this phenomenon was that Penny understood her place. She shouldn't feel bitter because, in the beginning, Penny was a kid her auntie didn't want to take care of. Her auntie simply had no choice since Penny's mother died during childbirth. In other words, not receiving any love from them should be no surprise. Not that she was craving for their love or affection or attention anymore. If anything, the corner of the 3-year-old child hooked up as her eyes landed on the snack on the table. Yugi, she called, her voice adorable with a pacifier still stuck in between her teeth. Yugi, the 3-year-old boy, looked at her after pushing his evil twin sister away. The latter started making noises as her eyes welled up. What is this? She raised her little finger. The first to answer me will become stronger. 1. Yugi yelled eagerly. That's 1. How about this? This time, Penny raised her 5 fingers and then another 2 on her left. Yugi's round face looked solemn as he stared at her fingers eagerly. 7, this time, Yuri answered. It's 7, 1, 2, 3, 7. Wow. Penny clapped in awe, watching Yugi glare daggers at his sister while Yuri meekly looked away from him. Yugi, why are you glaring at Yuri like that? You got it right first, but she didn't look at you like that. Yuri hiccuped and quickly ran behind Penny. Penny, Yugi is very bad. He's a bully. So what? Yugi jumped and stood up, hands on his little hips. So what if I am bad? Yuri is too weak and is younger than me. I should be the first to answer in everything. Penny blinked innocently, folding her arms underneath her chest. But I am younger too. Does that mean you should be my master? What? Yugi, it seems you already forgot your place. Penny frowned at the haughty look on Yugi's face faded. Fine. I'll make you remember who the boss here is. Penny pushed herself up, almost tumbling down at her weight. Unlike the two, Penny had gained a lot of weight, unlike her first life. Back then, she would barely eat anything, most of which were the family's leftovers. But now, Penny was no longer the whiny little kid who would depend on what her auntie gave her. Yugi, I'm sorry. Yugi suddenly collapsed on his knees, rubbing his hands together. I was wrong. Yuri, I'm sorry too. I was wrong. Please don't beat me up. Penny's smile stretched even more as she nodded approvingly. She cast Yuri a haughty look while the latter offered a meek smile. Penny, do you want my snacks? Yuri asked adorably. I'll get it for you. No. I'll do it. Yugi volunteered. I'll get you snacks. Wait for me here. With that being said, Yugi ran as fast as he could to offer Penny something to eat. Penny was the scariest when she was hungry. Yuri, on the other hand, faced Penny with a grateful smile. Penny is the best. Yuri blushed adorably. I'll give you half of my snacks tomorrow forever. Just make sure Yugi doesn't hurt me. Penny nodded at her reassuringly, patting her shoulders. Don't worry, Yuri. As long as I am here, no one will bully the two of you again. Her reassuring smile stretched into a grin. Now, get that for me while we're waiting for Yugi. Yuri tilted her head to the side, following where Penny was pointing with her gaze. Her eyes then landed on the leftover snacks on the table. Oh, those are your favorites. Yuri quickly went to get the food on the table, knowing this would make Penny happy. This had been Penny's life for the past 3 years. Instead of wanting to be accepted or treated by her auntie, Penny had been training the twins to be her loyal servants. Her auntie might be heartless and unsympathetic towards her, but she genuinely cares about her children. That day, Penny ate to her heart's content, offered by her loyal servants as her protection fee. However, deep in her heart, she knew this wasn't enough to survive the first 13 years of her life here. Weeks later. What the hell are you doing? Penny turned her head, only to see her auntie storm to her. Like a doll, her auntie grabbed her arm and pulled her up from the table in the living room. Seeing that she was playing with some mahjong tiles, the woman's eyes blazed with anger. I told you these aren't toys and you shouldn't touch them, she yelled. That's it. You're not having dinner tonight. But auntie, I'm just about to win. Huh, the woman scrunched up her nose in dismay. You're playing alone. What do you mean? She halted when she heard the television. Looking at it, deep lines appeared between her brows because it was broadcasting a mahjong game. You are. She trailed off as she gazed down at Penny, letting the kid go. She quickly sat down and checked Penny's tiles, darting her eyes to the television before her lips stretched from ear to ear. When she set her eyes on Penny, the initial anger she felt disappeared. I knew you were a smarty pants, but who would have thought you might become more useful than I thought? If this was a kid's movie, this moment would be scary or concerning, a turning point in the child's life. It was still a turning point for Penny, though. At 3 years old, Penny started her career as a mahjong analyst. Ever since the day that Jessa, Penny's auntie, learned her little genius niece had a knack for gambling, she kept taking her on her mahjong nights. Since she was just a 3-year-old, her mahjong buddies didn't mind having her sitting on her lap. For months, her auntie was on a lucky streak. There were days they would purposely lose a bit of money just not to raise suspicions. Ever since that day too, her auntie treated her like a golden cat. She listened to Penny to the point she was starting to worship her. However, Penny's charm in the mahjong table only lasted till she was 4. Penny needed to keep her auntie wrapped around her little pink. Hence, she came up with another plan. A plan where she would spend her next 2 years as a fortune teller with her auntie as her manager and her children as Penny's assistant. Somehow, it worked. One of the perks of going back in time was that Penny remembered most events not just in her life but also people in the community. Her auntie used to have a big mouth. Therefore, many people quickly believed in her gift because of her accuracy. At the age of 7, Penny now had full control over the family. Her cousins followed her like their leader, her auntie took care of her money tree, and her uncle approved of everything. On top of that, Penny was able to save up with the allowance given to her by her auntie. Although all the earnings should be hers, she didn't mind. By the age of 8, she already accumulated enough money to get herself a place to live. "Auntie, I don't want to read people's fortune anymore," said the 9-year-old Penny. "I've used up my gift so much so I feel like I'm going blind." "Oh, no, little master. Should we get you some dumplings so you feel better?" her auntie asked with deep worry, making the face of the 9-year-old contort. In her first life, Penny was malnourished. Even when she was a teen, her old clothes when she was 6 still almost fit. But in this life, at the age of 9, Penny was as healthy as a horse with the weight of a piglet. "Aha!" she exclaimed, watching the entire family stop eating melons while they looked up at her with shock and confusion. "I know now." The family she had been living with blinked curiously. "Auntie, I have an idea on how we can make money aside from telling people fortunes," she grinned, her plump cheeks bouncing as they blushed. "I will win all challenges in life and make us a fortune." The family couldn't help but tilt their heads to the side, wondering what sort of plan their healthy money tree had come up with this time. At the age of 9, Penny started her journey in academic competitions. Time went by in a blur, and before Penny knew it, her 13th birthday was coming up. "Penny, what do you want on your birthday?" Yuri asked excitedly, seated across from Penny at the dining table. "Should we throw a huge party and invite everyone?" "That's not bad," Yugi chimed in. "Or we can just celebrate it together. Let's go to the amusement park." Penny rubbed her chin, making her second chin bounce a little. Looking at the pair of eager eyes across from her, a smile turned up on her chubby face. "I don't know," she exclaimed. "I never thought of it." If she added her past life and this birthday would be her 42nd birthday. "Well, you children doesn't need to think of anything for her birthday because I already had a plan." Her auntie casually came into the dining area with a pot of warm soup. "We're going on a vacation." Penny looked up at her glamorous auntie, which was a lot different than how she remembered it in her previous life. Back then, her auntie always had her curlers stuck on her hair while wearing a worn-out dress. She used to be grumpy, but since Penny had been bringing money into the household, their lives were just as better as Penny's. 13 years of her memories in her previous life, they managed to earn quite a lot. Their house was bigger than it used to be, as it now had a few extra rooms. Penny got her own. Even though they maltreated her in her first life, Penny didn't hold a grudge against them just as much as the resentment she felt toward her real brothers. Moreover, these people managed to redeem themselves by being the fools they were. Penny was able to control them with her pinky. Now, instead of watching them warm themselves in preparation for the incoming winter, she had the leisure to enjoy a warm bowl of soup with them. Although she wasn't interested in hearing about the resort her auntie booked where they would spend her birthday, it still made her delighted. This life isn't as bad. Penny smiled brightly, her eyes squinting into mere slits. "By the way, Penny." Her auntie cleared her throat as she cast the chubby Penny a look. "I got a call from your school. They told me you got an invitation from this prestigious school in the city." "Huh?" Penny and her cousins looked at the woman with confusion. I forgot the name, but they said it's a school for geniuses like you, her auntie exclaimed with excitement. They will give you a full scholarship. Not only that, but the best of all is that they send their students to a national competition. Some of them were even sent abroad for international academic contests. Her auntie didn't have to say it, but Penny could already see the money signs in her auntie's eyes. Back in my previous life, my grades were always okay until I had to attend to that school, she pondered while staring at her auntie's sparkling eyes while the latter talked about the prestige of raising a genius. I could still remember how I spent countless nights studying. Unlike now, Penny studied really hard in her first life. She studied so hard she could still remember all the lessons in this lifetime. Therefore, winning an academic competition was as easy as breathing. Though I don't want to study in a different school, I guess it's expected that I garner the attention of a prestigious school. A shallow frown turned up on her face, glancing at her cousin who shared equal delight and sadness in their eyes. They used to be so annoying, but they somehow grew on me now. Auntie, I don't. Penny halted when she heard the doorbell ring. Everyone in the dining furrowed their brows because they weren't expecting any guests right now. You kids finish your soup so we can have dinner. I'll go check who it is. With that being said, Jessa pushed herself up and marched to their gates to see who was ringing their doorbell. Yuri and Yugi simply shrugged as they resumed their food while Penny couldn't help but gaze at the living area. For some reason, I feel like something's wrong, she told herself. When my gut feeling tells me something, I learned that I should listen to it. This was the greatest lesson she learned from her previous life. If only Penny listened to her gut feeling that time, she wouldn't have ended up in prison. Hence, following her gut instinct, Penny jumped from her chair and went to the front door. As soon as she reached their front door, she peeked her head out. The first thing she saw was her auntie's back and then the man standing outside the gates. Her eyes slowly dilated as soon as she recognized the person. You are safe now. Suddenly, the man's remarks in her previous life rang in her ears. What? Penny blurted out under her breath, staring blankly at the people by the gates. Why are they here so soon? It's not winter yet. In her first life, when these people came into their house, Jessa was more than happy to give Penny away. Jessa didn't even have second thoughts. All she cared about was how much these people would give her for taking care of Penny for 13 years. Are you insane? Jessa harumphed. How dare you people come into my house and claim my child as yours? Get out of my property right now. Penny flinched when her auntie suddenly threw a huge fit. Jessa aggressively chased the people away. The gates clanged aloud when Jessa slammed it closed, huffing sharply as she turned around. Auntie? Penny's round eyes swirled with curiosity. Who are those people? Jessa offered a short smile. They're no one. Just an insane bunch. She patted Penny's head and nodded. Let's get back in. The soup might turn cold. Come. Jessa warmly held Penny's hand, and they got in. Penny couldn't help but gaze up at her auntie's back. It wasn't like she didn't know Jessa was acting this way because she was the family's money tree. Even so, it put her heart at ease that those guys wouldn't get what they wanted so easily. The next day, those same people came back to their house. However, Jessa chased them away like a plague before they could even give her an offer. It was the same the day after that. And the day next to that. For the next several days, Jessa would camp in their front yard. She would enjoy her coffee in the morning with a broomstick clumped between her armpit. The people from Penny's real family would come by at the same exact time. So by the time Jessa finished her morning fuel, she was more than ready to chase them away. Penny, do you know those people who come to our house every day? Yuri walked beside her bicycle. Mom always looks even more furious every day because of them. Yugi spat out. Phew. Those people are just bothering our family because they're jealous of our fortune. Penny's face contorted. Why would one of the richest families in Antica get jealous of a middle-class family? It doesn't matter. Auntie is already handling it, so let's not worry about that, said Penny. Penny is right. Mom will chase them away until they give up. Yuri was enthusiastic. I wonder what we have for dinner. You always ask what's for dinner, but only Penny gains weight. Yugi hissed, poking fun at his twin sister out of habit. But in a way, he was also unknowingly poking fun at Penny, too. Penny looked at her cousin, smiling in satisfaction. These two used to bully her in the past, but now that Penny practically raised them, they're as good as trained pets. It's a good thing I decided to take charge of the family instead of holding on to my grievances. Penny was pleased she didn't resort to poisoning the entire family. If I didn't, I would have been thrown to that mansion the second they came to our doorstep. As the three made their way back home, a car blocked the path on the end turn of the street. The three looked at each other until a man in a fancy suit stood before them. "Miss Penny, we are from the Bennett family. Can we ask a minute of your time?" Standing in front of Penny was a tall man in his late 30s. She knew him. He was the man who promised her safety in her first life. Although he had been kind to her in her first life, he was usually absent most of the time. "Aren't you the people who have been pestering our family for weeks now?" Yugi jumped in front of Penny defensively. "What are you doing, ambushing kids like this?" Yuri, on the other hand, dropped her bicycle and held Penny's arm securely. The man glanced at the twins and then at Penny. "Young Mississippi. Penny will not come with you," Yuri yelled, her vicious voice from her first life. Peeking in. Penny almost flinched when she heard that tone from the now meek Yuri. "We're not abducting. Get away from us or we will scream for help." Yugi spread his arms to protect the girls behind him. He surely got his defensive demeanor from his mother. "I'll count to 3, 1, 2, Yugi, that's enough." Before Yugi could finish his countdown, Penny spoke. "I'll talk to them." "Penny, you can't do that. Mom always tells us not to trust strangers." Worry laced Yuri's voice, gripping Penny's arm tightly. "These guys can't be trusted." They couldn't, but Penny knew they wouldn't harm her. They might have come from her family, but taking her away without Jess's permission would still fall into a crime. Penny smiled reassuringly. "It's okay," she said. "I don't think they're bad people. It won't take long." "Then let us come with you," Yugi insisted. "We can't let you go on your own." And then, they would have to find out Penny wasn't their real cousin. "No. Go home." Penny cast Yugi a knowing look. "Please." Yugi took that look in her eyes as if she was telling them to ask for help. Hence, Yugi quickly nodded and then told Yuri to go home with him. Yuri was reluctant, but her brother dragged her away. Having said that, the twins went home while Penny went with the people from the Bennett. At her insistence, they followed her to the nearby park. Seated on each swing, the man gazed at the chubby girl in the swing. "I apologize if we have to resort to this, young Mississippi. Your auntie wouldn't let us talk to you or won't listen to us." The man sighed. "My name is Haynes Bennett. I assume your auntie didn't tell you why we come every day." The man explained the situation to Penny carefully and clearly. According to their investigation, Penny was a genius. Hence, he didn't feel the need to talk to her as a preteen but talked to her like an adult with respect. "I'm sorry that it took us this long, even if what you're saying is true, why are you here?" Penny cut him off and looked at him for the first time. "Isn't only right for my parents or my grandfather to come in here instead of my uncle? If they truly want me home, they should come themselves to show their sincerity." The man was surprised. The chubby kid's round eyes shone adorably but fiercely. "Uncle, I appreciate your efforts coming to our house every day. I also know you're not a bad person, but I'm happy with the way my life is," she continued. "My family has been taking care of me very well. So please, understand that I want to keep it that way." "But your auntie is just exploiting you," was what Haynes wanted to say. "You people." Suddenly, Jess's aggressive voice was heard. "I told you not to bother us again, but you're lower than I thought." Jessa aggressively grabbed Penny's arm, pulling her behind her while glaring daggers at Haynes. "If you don't stop harassing our family, I'll see to it that you'll regret it. Penny, let's go, and don't talk to these people again." "Auntie, not a word, Penny." Jessa huffed, glaring at Haynes once more. "This is my last warning, mister. I advise you to take this warning seriously because you don't want what I'll do if you don't." With that being said, Jessa took Penny home. Penny looked back at Haynes, but she couldn't help but smile when she shifted her eyes to Jessa. At that time, she thought it was possible to avoid ever stepping foot in the Bennett mansion. Jessa wasn't the type to back down, and if there was something Penny wanted in this life, that was to not ever see her family, especially her brothers. In the following month, Haynes stopped coming to their house and Penny didn't hear from them again. However, life has its funny way of putting things in order. 2 days before the original timeline of the day she returned to the Bennett mansion, Yuri suddenly contracted a life-threatening disease. They said it was pancreatitis, and that the symptoms only developed because Yuri got a complication of the disease. Worry filled Penny's eyes as she stared at Yuri lying on the bed. The rest of the family was around as well. Tears and fear brimmed their eyes as this had been a shock to them. Not so long ago, they were just living their lives normally until Yuri suddenly fell in pain while holding her stomach. From what Penny heard, Yuri needed to be treated in the hospital. I saved up since I started earning my commissions, but it wouldn't be enough. Penny shifted her eyes to Jessa, who was wiping her eyes. Jessa hadn't been worried about how much this treatment and staying in the hospital would cost them yet. But Penny was sure it would be another problem once Jessa saw their first billing. I should have told her to get insurance and health cards. Penny sighed. But I was worried she would get me insurance and kill me. She believed Jessa wasn't capable of doing that, but just to be sure. Penny decided not to think of that problem for now, but the problem arose just a few hours after that. Jessa stayed outside the ward with her husband, looking at their first billing with great shock and horror. Although they could pay for it, they knew their life savings wouldn't hold up if this continued. By the time Yuri recovered, they would be penniless. Taking peeks at the couple from the door, Penny studied the couple. Jessa was sitting on the stainless waiting chair while her husband stood in front of her. "We can just start all over again," said Jessa's husband while massaging her shoulder. "For now, Yuri's treatment is our priority." "I know." Jessa held his hand on her shoulder. "Penny is invited to study in this school of the elites, but I'm still worried. We'll help her study hard so she could win all those competitions." Jessa looked up at him and sighed. "But she can't join the competition unless she's been attending the school for a year. That was why I planned our budget until her next payout." "Then why not ask her to do something else? She's good at reading fortune. The kid has so much potential in basically everything." "Right. How about those guys that claim to be her family? Maybe we can negotiate?" Penny withdrew her head and leaned back against the wall. The door was slowly kept ajar, but she could still hear their hushed voices talking about how to replenish their savings. Penny had known all along that this couple only treated her well because of the money she was bringing home. But somehow, hearing them talking still stung. Gazing up at the bed and then to the couch where Yugi fell asleep, Penny smiled bitterly. "But I know these two aren't like them because I raised them right." When the couple returned, Penny pretended to sleep. Although it wasn't like the usual sleepovers she had with her cousin, she took it as her last sleepover with them. The next day, Penny went back home with her uncle and Yugi to have some proper rest home. But while the two rested, she went to the payphone and called Haynes. At the same park nearby, Haynes and Penny sat in each swing. "I'll come home," she said eagerly to the man. "But I have a few conditions. If you're willing to fulfill them, then I will come with you." Haynes frowned a little as it sounded like she was being held captive. The Bennetts had been quiet because they were preparing for legal action, but then Penny called. "What are your conditions, young miss?" he asked. "You can ask for anything." She should because she deserved it. "First, shoulder all Yuri's medical expenses, even her post-recovery," she started without a second hesitation. "Second, sponsor the twins' education under an anonymous name. It doesn't matter if they only had passing grades. The support will stay unless I change my mind." Haynes was a little surprised at her priority, but he was even more puzzled at the detail of her condition. It was as though she was closing all loopholes anyone could find. "Third, you will triple the amount you're offering my auntie," she added. This time, Haynes frowned. "I cannot do that," he returned, thinking Jessa might have put Penny to this. "My auntie has nothing to do with this deal." Much to his surprise, Penny clarified what was on his mind, as if she could read him like an open book. "I know she's been exploiting me, but it's not deception if I already know what they were doing and I am letting them." Again, Haynes was out of words. When he recovered, he said, "Even if that is the case, I cannot triple the amount we are offering her." They took care of the only daughter of the Bennet for 13 years, Penny stressed each syllable. "And you're telling me I am not worth that much? I now see where I stand in the family." Was this young lady truly 13? Haynes found himself opening and closing his mouth, but his voice was stuck in his throat. Even the genius first son of the Bennet doesn't render him speechless like this. "We'll triple the offer," Haynes conceded helplessly. He thought he came prepared, but it seemed his preparation wasn't enough. "Is there anything else you want, young miss?" "Yes, there's one last thing." Penny took a deep breath before she added, "Lastly, I want to use my last name, Reed, even if it is changed to Bennet. My family is rich and influential. They can ask my new school's headmaster to let me use Reed while keeping my real last name in their records." Out of the 4 requests she asked of him, this was her only request for herself. It wasn't a hard task per se, but Haynes was puzzled. "I can do that arrangement. But if I may, can I ask why?" Penny pondered for a second and said the first thing that came into her mind. "Because Reed sounds better with my name than Bennet." "Huh. So uncle." She jumped from the swing and faced him, offering her hand to him. "Do we have a deal?" Haynes gazed up at the round girl wearing layers and layers of clothes in front of him and smiled. He took her little chubby hand and nodded. "It's a... Oh, I forgot. Also, I don't like any party or the sort for my coming home." Haynes chuckled. "I figured that when you said your last request. Though it'll be a challenge, I'll make it happen." Having said that, the two parted temporarily only for Haynes to come the next day. This time around, Jessa couldn't chase them away because of the offer the man gave her. Though Jessa showed reluctance, that amount could support their entire family for the rest of their lives. As for Penny, she was more than astounded when she heard the amount Haynes offered. It was 20 times more than the amount they offered Jessa in her first lifetime. Who would have known all these months of resistance, the number rose this high? Regardless of the petty thoughts, the real heiress of the Bennet returned to the household that neglected her. The negotiations were just as quick as how it went down in the first lifetime. Jessa and her husband were shocked while holding a check, and they forgot this was about another human being. If there was any difference between this life and the previous one, it was Yugi's reaction. Yugi created a huge fuss, but it was futile because, in the end, Penny still came with Haynes. Today was the same day she went home to the Bennet mansion. Seated in the van that looked like a suite, Haynes glanced at the young lady next to him. Now that she was heading home, he was expecting to see any slight changes in her usually composed innocence. But Penny was rather calm. "I guess she's fine," he thought with a short smile. "Young miss, why don't you rest for a while? It's a 5-hour drive." Penny sighed faintly. "Mr. Haynes, can you just call me Penny? Young miss makes me uncomfortable." "Then you can call me Uncle Haynes." His warm smile contrasted with his strong facial features. "Why don't you rest, Penny? Or are you hungry?" Was he asking her because of her size? Although it was obvious Penny gained all this weight without her noticing, it was because she was malnourished almost her entire first life. First was because of Jessa's maltreatment, and then she got too busy pleasing her brothers she picked up a bad habit of skipping meals. "I'm not hungry," she said. "Then, do you want to talk?" he inquired. "Do you want to know about your family? You have 3 brothers. 3 insufferable brothers." "No." Penny shook her head. "I want to get to know them myself, thank you." Worry suddenly peeked in Haynes's eyes while Penny looked away. In his mind, it was much better if he briefed Penny about what she would expect in the mansion. What he didn't know was Penny knew exactly what to expect. Penny eventually fell asleep, and when she woke up, she immediately caught sight of the huge gates opening for them. She rubbed her eyes and sat upright. "We're here, Penny." She looked to her side and saw Haynes smiling. She didn't say anything back and simply waited for the van to stop. Haynes came out from the other side while Penny was about to open the door for herself when it opened from the outside. There, an old man in a butler suit looked at her and smiled until his eyes looked like mere slits. "Young Miss Penelope," called the old man, his voice exuded eloquence. "Allow me to help you, my young lady. Butler Jen." Penny looked at the old man and smiled subtly. In her previous life, Butler Jen stood more as a family to her than the rest of the family. Butler Jen and Haynes were the only ones who truly cared for her. Penny took his hand and said, "Thank you." Butler Jen held the young lady's cold hand and escorted her down. Once she reached the ground, he put his hand over her head in a frail attempt to shield her from the snow. "Butler Jen, where's everyone?" Haynes asked behind as they took the steps up the porch. Butler Jen looked back. "They're waiting in the living area, Sir Haynes. The weather is terrible, so they couldn't wait out here in the cold." "I see. Your family is inside, Miss Penny." Butler Jen offered Penny another warm smile, keeping her hand securely in his hand. "They're very excited to see you." Penny doubted that, but she still sported a small smile. The mansion had a huge two-door entrance. As soon as they reached the porch, the servants inside opened it timely. Watching the gap between them widen, the natural innocence in Penny's eyes slowly turned as cold as the season. 7 figures came into view, 4 children with the oldest at 17, a middle-aged couple, and then an elderly man with a cane. Allison hurriedly rose to her feet as soon as the door opened. Her eyes were teary with a tinge of nervousness. Relief washed over her face as soon as her eyes landed on the young, chubby girl entering the premises. The flow of emotions a mother had for her child came surging into her heart. This was their first time meeting Penny, but her heart immediately recognized her flesh and blood. It was a maternal instinct she felt with her boys, but never with the daughter she raised for 13 years. "Dear." Charles, her husband, placed a hand on her shoulder and smiled. Allison nodded at him, and they both met Penny halfway. "Hello." Allison bent down a little, resting her hands on her knees. "My name's Allison. I'm your mother." Allison hesitated because she didn't know if she was doing this correctly. Penny might be family, but for this girl, they were nothing but strangers. "Penny." Knowing his wife, Charles chimed in with a gentle smile. "I'm your dad. I know this is a shock to all of us, but you are our family now." Just like Allison, Charles was unsure if he was doing this right. Who would know what to say and do in this situation? Even if they follow what they want to do to make up for the 13 years their real daughter was away, they also have to consider Penny's feelings. Penny's silence added to the couple's nervousness as they looked at each other before casting Haynes a look. Haynes just smiled helplessly. He already told them what Penny was like and reminded them Penny didn't like being treated like a child. She didn't tell Haynes that, but he assumed based on his interactions with her. As for Penny, she quietly gazed at her parents. "They weren't bad to me in the past. If anything, I know they have pure intentions, but..." They still unknowingly neglected her because they felt guilty for Nina, and didn't want to make the latter feel left out just because of her. Penny secretly took a peek at the children behind her parents. The 17-year-old Atlas and 16-year-old Hugo stared at her impassively. But the 15-year-old Slater didn't feel the need to hide his disdain. The beautiful doll standing beside Slater, who was the same age as Penny, wore a small and forced smile. "Heh." Penny mentally sneered. It's nice to see them so young again. She didn't want to waste her time on revenge, but petty as it may sound, it would still feel nice to annoy them. Her very existence was already annoying to them, anyway. "Mommy." Penny grinned from ear to ear as she leaped toward Allison and hugged the madam tightly. Surprise took over Allison's eyes before she looked at Charles with relief. "Oh, my dear Penny." "Yes, it's Mommy." Charles smiled in satisfaction while Haynes couldn't help but feel the slight doubt. Penny, on the other hand, peeked over and caught the irritation on Slater's face, the slight displeasure in Hugo's eye, the unfazed look on Atlas, and then the down curve on Nina's lips.